Good morning, members of the media. Thanks for coming once again. I would like to raise a couple of matters with you this morning. First, let me make a few comments on the matter which is, or one of the matters which is before the public at this time, continuing from last week. I speak specifically about the investigation into the conversations of the emails which were introduced in the parliamentary debate. And I would just like to confirm that I continue to cooperate fully with the police investigations on that matter, albeit that it is clear that at the government's request, as a member of parliament who determined that this matter should be raised in the parliament so that the public could be made aware of what issue exists and what the pros and cons were, that I am apparently being investigated. I listened to what was said by government spokespersons, and they have been expressing the view that I somehow have something to do with the generation of those conversations in the document I put in the parliament. The police immediately came to me, and while the normal procedures have not been followed, where if a person is the subject of an investigation or is suspect in a crime, such a person is expected to be cautioned accordingly so that the person would know how to proceed in protection of his or her rights. As of now, I have received no such procedural courtesies from the police. Yet, it is clear to me the way the investigation is proceeding and the demands of the government clearly indicate that I am being investigated. However, notwithstanding that, and in an effort to ensure that the public receives the fullest cooperation from me and my office in this matter, I have continued to cooperate with the police, who have communicated with my attorney and made requests of me, and we have responded to the police, requesting with them certain specificities, because it is still unclear what exactly is required of me. So there's communication between my attorney and the police, and I stand ready to cooperate with any reasonable requests or any lawful requests made to me by the investigating officers of the Trinidad and Tobago Police Service. However, I maintain that the investigation into the matter, which was laid before the Parliament, should be done by an independent investigator reporting to persons who have no interest in covering for themselves. As a matter of fact, it was a member of the government, a former High Court judge, who in the debate pointed out the need for such an independent investigation. I think the widespread opinion in the country, regardless of what view citizens may take, pro or con on the matter, that the need for an independent investigation It's obvious. It appears as though there are only a few persons who do not see it that way. What we have is an Attorney General who is integral with respect to the conversations recorded in the document I presented in the Parliament, and who has steadfastly maintained that he will remain in the investigative process. Even as the police is proceeding with their investigation, whatever one might think of that investigation, we have the absurdity of the Attorney General conducting or purporting to conduct his own investigation, including the use of his own staff, where he presents the findings of his own self-serving investigation and makes that public, or cause that to be made public as his position on the matter. It is our view that this defense is vulgar, this approach is unacceptable, and we will pay it no mind, because we believe that the behavior of the Attorney General in this matter falls well below the standards expected of an officer of the court who would know and should know how investigations should proceed if the findings are to be accepted as fair and reasonable. So we dismiss that and continue to call for an independent investigation. We find it quite worrisome that a lot of effort is being put into collecting or seeking to access handsets and computers. But so far we've had no confirmation that the obvious place to look has been examined. And that obvious place is the servers, where there's comprehensive and unambiguous storage of any email traffic between parties. There are procedures which are well known in this country and outside of this country as to how one accesses the database at the servers, and one would have thought that an investigation that is meant to be comprehensive, unbiased, and useful would have immediately sought to access that data rather than data which can be tampered with, unpresented, or misinterpreted in people's hands. It is against that background that we continue to demand that the Integrity Commission investigate this matter regardless of what happens with the current investigation. Because we are of the view that the law provides us with the mechanism for the Integrity Commission to go to the appropriate unaffected places to determine whether such conversations as are outlined in the emails at Parliament in fact took place, and between whom and when. Until that is done, there is no real investigation taking place, because that is the only place where the substance of this matter can be properly examined. We are not inventing any wheels here, and the procedures are available. In fact, if we need external assistance to get to the servers, Trinidad and Tobago as a country, we have arrangements in place through the Mutual Assistance Treaty to seek that assistance without any fear or favor. Unfortunately, the initiative to do that is expected to come from the Office of the Attorney General, an interested party in this investigation. And rather than proceed along that line to go to the unpolluted database, we get the preposterous arrangement of public expressions in the newspapers of the Attorney General and the staff determining that the emails are fake. But it's interesting that the expert, or the so-called expert, whose report was published yesterday, points out that certain things could be done if one wants to confirm the authenticity of the conversations. Clearly, the so-called expert is saying that these things have not been done, but they could be done. We are not relying on interested parties to conduct this investigation. We want an independent state to investigate. This is why we are now very pleased to hear from the Office of the President that in a matter of days, we will have an integrity commission. And we expect that that commission will move with haste to look at what has been put before the public with respect to the purported conduct of persons who hold public office. In my own case, having little confidence in what is passing for an investigation now, and because the government has seen it fit to identify me as the perpetrator or a conspirator with some other parties in generating this issue, and being entirely innocent of any such thing, I have instructed my attorneys to write to the Integrity Commission indicating that as Member of Parliament for Diego Martin West and holder of the office of Opposition Leader, both of which put me clearly as a person in public life, falling under the authority of the Integrity in Public Life Act, I have instructed my attorneys to write to the Integrity Commission indicating my willingness and availability to make available to the Integrity Commission any and all of my electronic devices and to hold myself available to cooperate fully and unreservedly with any investigation that the Integrity Commission would want to initiate in this matter. I am aware that the President did pass this matter to the Integrity Commission. So the matter is before the Commission. The Commission could not have functioned because there is no quorum at the Integrity Commission. So in a few days' time, we expect that that will change. And I stand ready to cooperate fully in the expected and anticipated thorough investigation to be done by the Integrity Commission, which has powers beyond the police powers to investigate matters even as far as ethical or unethical conduct. That letter would have gone off to the Integrity Commission last week, and I await the outcome of that offer and the anticipated independent investigation. But there's a troublesome development which we have to pay attention to. In the arrangement of the Attorney General's office, where there's a central authority which can pursue these matters or any other matter of this nature, there is provision for parties to recuse themselves if they are in fact in conflict with the investigation. In this particular case, the presence of the Attorney General in this matter is a clear conflict. And like the DPP, one would have expected that the Attorney General would have sidestepped this issue and passed on the authority of the central authority to some other designated officer in the AG's office, so as to ensure that the area of investigation is sanitized, if I may use the vulgar phrase. We have no information that that is happening. In fact, we went further, long before these emails came to the Parliament, and demanded the removal of the Attorney General. That didn't happen because the government is supporting his position. The Prime Minister supports his position, that he remains there. Now that we have reached a point of investigations into a matter which poses a threat to the very life of the government, and that if we have confirmation of any one of those emails, that they are persons with serious questions to answer, rather than have the conduct as expected, where the Attorney General would recuse himself from involvement in the matter. He is there very much in it, and casting aspersions on people, making the most destructive comments about people, while he himself sits in conflict in a situation where this country is waiting with bated breath for the outcome of an investigation which could change the face of this country. So, once again, we call for ethical conduct in the government of Trinidad and Tobago, particularly at the Office of Attorney General, which is an office that is central to these investigations and to the outcome of any investigation on these matters. I come to the issue of the fire truck. This must be one of the clearest demonstrations to the people of Trinidad and Tobago that the government of Trinidad and Tobago poses a danger to the people of Trinidad and Tobago. And when one listens to the ongoing commentary and excuses coming from the government, one can only be frightened that one could have been trusting that there was a cabinet in place taking action on our behalf. And now that we know what they're doing, or what they have done, that the government is explaining its conduct in the way that it is being explained. I want to begin by taking issue with the government's spokesperson, Minister Jamal Mohammed, who is reported today as saying that the Minister of National Security is waiting for a report from the Chief Fire Officer before he can comment on the government's ridiculous actions, which is now recorded as history. I want to draw to your attention, members of the public, that there is no report to be waited upon. The Chief Fire Officer had, in fact, provided a detailed report about this matter before the cabinet took the decision to pay. So all the relevant details already exist in the report of Chief Fire Officer Williams. So we will not be fooled or delayed by any attempt at buying time, where the government is hoping that with time this issue would boil down. So we are now being told that Minister George is waiting for a report from the Chief Fire Officer, who is there now. There is no report to come. There is no new information to be added. The report of Chief Fire Officer Williams is comprehensive and timely, and it exists. So, the head of the cabinet is saying nothing. The minister is saying nothing. But we have the communications minister trying to mislead the public that the reason why they are saying nothing is because there is some report being awaited. Absolute nonsense. They are simply trying to buy time, hoping that the issue would fade away. What have they done? They have, as a cabinet, taken a decision to pay $6.8 million for an item which had a value of less than $1 million. I guess every person in this country can understand how to treat with a crashed vehicle. What is a car, a truck, a van, or a bus? And that is why this is so clear for the public, that this is what the government is doing, this is what they have done. And listen to the foolishness that the government is now saying to justify what they have done. That the reason why they agreed to pay $6.8 million is because they were told that a new one would cost $50 or $60 million. Now, who are these morons in the cabinet who somebody could tell that a water truck would cost $40 million and therefore you should pay $6.8 million to recover one that fell down the gully? And to think that they could tell us that with a straight face.
And what is worse, you have the head of the COP, Prakash Ramadan. He is most upset that this matter has leaked to us, because this leak ought not to have happened. It should have remained confidential, because it is the leak that is now the problem, causing us to have to know that they did what they did. Now, ladies and gentlemen, how does the matter get to the cabinet? Cabinet does not deal with word of mouth. Cabinet deals with cabinet notes. For a matter to be addressed by the cabinet, somebody has to take a cabinet note to the cabinet. Cabinet notes come under the hand of the relevant minister. Every single issue of governmental activity is located under the authority of a minister. So if something has to go to the cabinet, the relevant minister or a designated minister will bring that note to the cabinet in documentary form. A cabinet note is not normally written by the minister himself. Usually, it's written in or by the department involved under the supervision of the permanent secretary. Or the permanent secretary will collect the information from the department and write the note. The note goes to cabinet under the authority of the minister. The minister takes ownership of the note when it goes to cabinet. So when somebody wants $10 million for a job, and is on its way to the cabinet, somebody takes ownership of that information and goes to the cabinet with it. And when it gets there, that minister is required to defend the note. In other words, you have brought this here. It is your view that this should be done, and therefore you have to defend your position. And if you are not able to convince your colleagues, then the note fails. That is how a cabinet functions, at least up until this government came into office. Now we are hearing that the cabinet agreed to deliberate on a $10 million proposal. That means a minister of this government had agreed that $10 million was acceptable for this job. Now understand something. It is quite possible that the instructions could have been given to pick the truck up and we'll pay for it. Implied contract, not in the document pass. However, when it's time to pay for it, if the person who did the job is making an exorbitant request for payment, all that the ministry had to do, or the department had to do, is to say, we're not paying that. Your request is exorbitant, and you offer a reasonable figure. If the contractor rejects that reasonable figure, what's available to the contractor is to take it to court for what he believes to be the correct price. And when the matter gets to court, the court will then deal on what is called a quantum merit basis, which is look at it, see what is reasonable in the marketplace, and make a ruling. And then you, the contracted person, will get paid what the court believes is a reasonable figure. So what is this fare that the cabinet was dealing with? That they had to agree to some prearranged, implied or written contract, which was so exorbitant that the cabinet could do nothing but pay it. We reject that out of hand as just a poor excuse from persons who have failed the people of Trinidad and Tobago. And the explanations coming particularly from the COP member, Prakash Ramadan and others, are nothing short of insulting. They sat there as a cabinet and took a cabinet decision to make this ridiculous payment. And then we're now hearing that the Prime Minister is now putting arrangements in place to get proper accounting documents before cabinet pays. Well, for a start, if they had allowed the public service to function, and for the matter to come from the fire department to the permanent secretary to the cabinet, there would be no need for the minister to be so directly involved in this. Because all the minister had to do was to take a note, which should have been cleared by the permanent secretary, who as accounting officer would have known that he or she would have been held personally responsible for any matters of this nature. But more interestingly, we are hearing Minister Prakash Ramada say that this, what we have heard so far, is not the whole truth, and that there's something called the full truth which has to come out and which he is working on so that the veil of cabinet secrecy could be raised so we can get the full truth. Well, I don't know what this full truth is, because it certainly wouldn't be any better than what we heard so far. It has to be worse. And let us wait for the full story here, because the COP is promising to tell us the full story. And the Prime Minister is only putting things in place now to ensure that there is proper accounting because the matter has come out in the public domain. When it had remained a secret, well known only to the Cabinet, the Prime Minister didn't see fit to put things in place. Because remember, all the details are before the Cabinet and out of view of the people of Trinidad and Tobago. Nothing was put in place then to protect us. It is only now that it has become a public scandal that we are hearing that as a result of the public being made aware of this scandal, that something will be put in place. Well, we already have something in place, and the Prime Minister is doing us no favor. What we have in place is a public service, which is called the bureaucracy, which is meant to protect us from the excesses of the political directorate. And we have complained on many occasions from this podium that this government is not allowing the public service to run the country. And what is happening is that the political directorate have been taking liberties with the public purse. I give you the example of the public vehicles. Under this government, this cabinet, under this Prime Minister, allowed ministers of government to operate public vehicles. At least one minister crashed a public vehicle. It ended up in the Parliament by way of a question to the Parliament, where they lied and half-lied in trying to answer the questions. But the bottom line was, in order to protect the minister who were violating the regulations with respect to the use of public vehicles by ministers, the Cabinet proceeded to change the arrangements so as to allow ministers to continue to abuse their office, not asking them to observe the regulations and not operate government vehicles. They did the opposite. They changed the regulations to allow ministers to operate government vehicles. And you had situations where ministers were buying high-end vehicles for their personal use, as against the arrangements under the SRC, which were there for ministerial travel. All of this they have done. So what you're seeing here with this fire truck is just an easily understood example of how this government has been misbehaving, misrepresenting, and wasting public monies to people who have been allowed so to do. And everybody in the cabinet should be held accountable, because what we were saying all along, there were persons in the cabinet to whom the Prime Minister could not say no. And this is a classic case, because any Prime Minister of Trinidad and Tobago, having a minister in the cabinet coming to tell you to buy a truck, to pick up a truck from a gully for $6.8 million, when the 6-year-old truck is worth less than $1 million, and you could have bought 3 new ones. And they started by telling you that the contractor wanted $10 million and that a new truck will cost $40 million. Any Prime Minister who would have listened to all that rubbish and not chased the minister out of the room, that's the Prime Minister who is detrimental to the good order of Trinidad and Tobago. And of course, based on the comments that we're hearing and what we know of the government, this is only one of many examples that exist behind closed doors. I draw your attention to the amount of money involved here. $6.8 million for a wrecked water truck. The average person could understand that. But this is just the thin end of the wedge. There are many, many more instances of this, with far greater sums of money paid in a similar manner. Let me give you 2 examples, which we put out in the public domain already. One, there's a cabinet note which says that because there is so much land available from Carly Limited, much of which has been designated by planners to be useful for housing in central Trinidad. The cabinet took a position, and it's recorded there, that the HDC should not buy land from private persons because there's enough land from state sources in that area. Lo and behold, in 2012, the HDC set about to buy a small development from a developer who is well known in government circles. They got a valuation of the piece of land. It's a plot called Eden Gardens in Calcutta Road in Couva. The valuation was done by Lyndon Scott, and it showed that at best the development was worth, as is where is, $52 million. A cabinet note was produced, I guess in the same way that the one was produced with the fire truck. And in the same way that a minister went before the cabinet and made a case for an expenditure that didn't make any sense, the Minister of Housing took a note to cabinet, and the cabinet agreed to purchase the land for $175 million. That is approximately $120 million more than the valuation. Now, every person who owns a property in Trinidad and Tobago knows that it is the valuation that the valuator puts on your property that gives you, the owner, or someone, the purchaser, a claim on what the value of the property is. Lyndon Scott is one of the prominent valuation firms in the country and would have professionally valued this place for $52 million. But for reasons best known to the government, and the reason is that the owner of the land wanted $180 million. So they bought it for $175 million. So they saved the country $5 million. That is the government's argument. When this matter was raised publicly, as I raised it in the budget debate last year, the payment was not yet made. So the government had the opportunity to review it and to back away from doing what they had intended to do. I am informed that notwithstanding the fact that it was brought to the attention of the cabinet that their scandalous conduct was questionable and ought not to be tolerated, that the government in fact proceeded to make this purchase for $120 million more than the valuation. And what is worse, subsequent to raising this matter in the Parliament over valuation versus purchase price, I was then provided with documentation that showed that 1 year before the HDC bought this land, the exact parcel of land was purchased by the government's friend for $5 million. So here you had it. A piece of land is purchased in 2011 for $5 million. The owners put in some roads, some streetlights, and some form of sewer treatment plant that increased the value, and the valuator gave it a value of $52 million generously. Yet, the government saw it fit to proceed to purchase that development for $120 million more than the valuation. So if you think that the public took a hit on the fire truck, the real issue is in the purchase of that land, because the state would have lost many, many times more dollars in that. That's an example. We have sent this matter and all the details and documentation to the Integrity Commission. And one of the observations in that document you will see is that the HDC commissioned that valuation of that land at a date prior to the date when the owner made the offer of the land to the HDC. So we await the outcome of the Integrity Commission's investigation in this matter. But the public took a hit of $120 million there. Put it in real terms, at least in the case of the fire truck, you can visualize a truck, a crash vehicle, and a loss of $6 million on that. But let me visualize for you what the $120 million loss at HDC means. It means about 500 housing units for low-income families. That's what that means. One person would have been favored with a check for $120 million more than the valuation, and 500 families would have been deprived of low-income houses. That's what that one meant. Let me give you another example along the fire trucking line. Bear in mind that the crash vehicle, we lost $6 million there. But a few months ago, at a public meeting in Coquia Village, I drew to the attention of the population that the Ministry of Works had set out to judge the mouths of 3 rivers in the northwest of Trinidad. The St. Anne's River, commonly called the Dry River, the Maraval River, and the Diego Martin River. The judging of these rivers, of the mouths of these rivers, take place every so often so as to minimize flooding in the various valleys. So every so often the government, the Ministry of Works Drainage Division would undertake the judging of these mouths. So it's not an unknown exercise to the Ministry of Works. And the average cost prior to this government coming into office was somewhere in the order of $5 million per river. This government, under a minister of this government, set about to have the exercise done. And when I spoke in Coquia Village, I told the country that what the government did was to award contracts for this job at $20 million a piece. So instead of the 3 river mouths being dredged for approximately $15 million, that's $5 million a piece, the government awarded contracts at $20 million a piece. So the job was being done for $60 million. That is $45 million more than it was normally done for. And of course, my information was that the contractors who got this job were not required to do what the other contractors were to do, which was to take away the silt well away from the mouths of the river and have it dumped into the deep ocean where it wouldn't clog the mouth of the river. In some instances, the contractor just dipped the silt out from the mouth of the river and piled it up on the bank of the river there, subsea, waiting to be flushed back into the river. The bottom line is, on that occasion, they pretended to have bids, but it was a clear case of apparent bid rigging, where they called 3 contractors in, and interestingly enough, each contractor bid low on one of the rivers and bid very high on the other 2. So each contractor was guaranteed a river based on a single low bid, and the other 2 on that river would be out. And the arrangement was that each contractor had a river. But by that place, they set the price.
You hear from the head of the COP that this is a problem with the country's constitution
and it requires reform of the constitution. Absolute nonsense. This has nothing to do with the constitution. It has to do with people sitting in cabinet who are not prepared to say no to their coalition partners. And if it is so unpalatable, then especially with a coalition, what you do is to walk out of it. You don't stay in it and hope that your agreements remain secret. And when the public is made aware of it, you start questioning who leaked it, and you start saying it is the Constitution. As a matter of fact, what a coalition government allows is that matters of this nature or any similar nature are more easily dealt with by coalition partners demanding high order, demanding good performance, or else I will disassociate from you. What the COP has been doing is providing support for every aspect of wrongdoing by this government. Every single issue that came up where wrongdoing has been identified on the part of the main coalition partner, the UNC, you will see that it was fully endorsed and supported by the COP. The Reshma Ramnawain affair, you had Mr. Prakash Ramada in Parliament telling the Parliament about her qualifications, when that was not true. the Section 34 fiasco. He was in the middle of it as acting Attorney General. The matters to deal with the state of emergency, where persons were picked up without evidence and treated in a way that called into question the government's respect for human rights and the rule of law. They were right there defending it. The assassination hoax, they were right there defending it. So don't come and tell us now about any constitution. This is not a matter of the constitution. Because under any constitution, we expect that there will be a cabinet. And if the cabinet will make a decision like this, or like the ones I've just described, then clearly it is not the constitution, it is the people who sit around the cabinet table. And they do all manner of evil, hoping that it will remain a secret. In the absence of secrecy, they have now been exposed to public anger on this matter. So we're not buying into that. And we now have to understand that some of the cabinet decisions boggle the mind. I don't know how we're going to amend the constitution to prevent the cabinet from appointing a CPEP contractor to chair Caribbean Airlines. He was in the cabinet when that was done. Now we're hearing that the said incompetent is to be chairman of the HDC. That too is going to be, or has been, a cabinet decision. And these are the kinds of decisions that the cabinet has been taking. And on every single occasion, the Prakash Ramadhan in particular is out front providing justification and explanations for the government. One would have expected that in a coalition, a minority partner would have said no to these things. Instead of saying no to them, they have been saying, full speed ahead, we are behind you. So, today, we are calling on the people of Trinidad and Tobago to demand of the Prime Minister of Trinidad and Tobago an explanation given by her to the people of Trinidad and Tobago for two matters. One, the cabinet decision to pick up that cash truck, which is basically a water tender water truck, for $6.8 million as a cabinet decision. And two, the purchase of land in an area where the government is awash with land for $175 million on a valuation of $52 million. We are requesting that the Prime Minister address the nation on these two matters, because the Prime Minister has a habit, when the government is exposed to severe wrongdoing and general misconduct, she remains silent and gives us this inane statement about my hands are clean, my heart is pure. We're not concerned about your hand, we're not concerned about your heart, as for you and the doctor. We want to hear from you, as head of the cabinet, a proper explanation for these two expenditures, the fire truck issue and the purchase of the land at Calcutta Road. Any questions?
Dr. Rowley, do you have any concerns? I'm asking in light of an express report to the story concerning concerns in the DPP's office about CCTV camera system being able to be accessed at the AG's office. Is this something, in light of the situation with a report on bugging of the DPP's office, a matter of concern for you?
It is because I have serious concerns about that, or any similar development. Why, when I received that document, which purported to be emails, I looked at it and I thought that if in fact this is happening, that this is a very serious matter. And when I took that document to the Parliament to bring the population into the conversation, I understood very clearly the implications of any such development. And that is one of the issues to be investigated by any independent investigator. Subsequent to the matter being taken to the Parliament, I have seen certain publications of issues of this nature, and what you have just referred to is a further expansion of that. And I find the response again of the Attorney General to be less than comforting. However, I anticipate a full and thorough investigation into these matters, but I don't expect it to come from the government.
Have you had any cause or reason to look at your own office to determine whether there are any such electronic monitoring devices?
Well, when I just came into this building, such a sweep was done by the special branch. I discovered 3 years later that there's a back door into this office that we had no knowledge of. And the document that I spoke to you about the Couva housing, disappeared from my office one night, and I never saw it again. I left it on my office the night before I went to Parliament in that budget debate. And when I came back here the next morning, the document mysteriously disappeared, and we could never find it. And I was convinced from that day that this office was in fact the subject of interest to others. But let's put it this way, I have nothing to hide. So, if it is that they want to look in the office, whatever they find, they can find it. And the same thing with my conduct as a public official. So I'm not really worried about, I know that they have a particular interest in me because of the office I hold, but I view that as part of the course. So my concern is an office like the Director of Public Prosecution, who under the Constitution is required to provide comfort and guarantees to the population that justice must and will be done. If that office is penetrated by other parties for reasons best known to them, that should be of serious concern to all the people of Trinidad and Tobago. And that is one of the matters that ought to be thoroughly investigated. And from what is already in the public domain, I am sure that there's more to be learned of this matter. And once again, the Office of the Attorney General comes up for scrutiny.
When did this intrusion occur? When did it occur? Have you reported it to the police, and have you taken any precautions since then?
I've reported a number of matters to the police from this office. I've had absolutely no feedback on any of them. So I leave it at that. But we didn't know that there was a back door here which could be accessed until 2 Mondays ago.
You actually mean a physical back door,
Yes.
or hole in the roof, a metaphorical
A
door,
door.
or a physical door?
On the day when I went to Parliament with these emails, that was the day I found out, which I've been here for 3 years, and I never knew that this building could be entered by other parties through a back door unknown to me and my staff. We have serious electronic devices in front, but here it was, the front was well secured, and the back was wide open. I reported to Parliament, who is the landlord here, and if the Parliament rents from a landlord, and Parliament, who rented this building for us, was unaware of that situation as well. But I do know that I've had reason to believe that this building was in fact penetrated. And as I say, I have nothing to hide, and I did suffer a particular loss of the documents relating to that particular item. However, I can provide you this morning with the cabinet note. It's not lost forever. The cabinet note, where the cabinet agreed to buy Eden Gardens for $175 million. And I can provide you the valuation from Linden Stock. When Linden Stock valued it at $52 million. I'll give you those documents this morning, notwithstanding the penetration of my office.
So when did we say this penetration occurred? What sort of period?
That was last year, September, only at the budget debate.
And we were saying, without revealing a secret, if you sort of taken any precautions, like putting up cameras or...
Yeah, we have cameras in the building, we have cameras here. But I'm not going to tell you what precautions I've taken.
Dr. Ali, what do you think about the Auditor General 2012 report?
confirmation of what we have been saying. Confirmation of what we have been saying all along. The Auditor General has simply confirmed and put in dollars and cents what we have been saying. These things have been happening in the government.
But Dr. Ravi, these things, I mean, Auditor General's reports routinely do have overpayment, whether it's with bureaucracy or whatever. But is there anything particularly bad? I mean, does it seem like a particularly bad
I
case?
have been in Parliament now for 20 odd years dealing with reports of this nature. And like you said, yes, the role of the Auditor General is to locate these shortcomings, identify them, so that they can be rectified. This particular report is beyond the pale, and it points not just to instances of shortcomings, it points to systematic collapse of the public purse into the hands of persons who have no respect for the protection. Because you see, some of the arrangements put in place by this government are done deliberately to facilitate the kinds of problems identified by the Auditor General. And when we meet in Parliament on Wednesday, I will go into further details on that. I want to make one other comment before I close. And it has to do with me appearing before the Privileges Committee. As you know, as a member of Parliament for Diego Martin West, of long standing, and with the responsibility of leader of the opposition, representing not just Diego Martin West, but the entire country, it was my judgment and my responsibility and my duty to take what I thought should be taken to the Parliament. And I've done so. There are those who are not pleased that I've done that. But I don't report to them. I report to those who would require to know what's happening in this country and whether we should be concerned about what might be happening. However, having done that, clearly I have offended the government, and the government has taken steps to place me before the Privileges Committee of the Parliament. Well, it is my intention to cooperate fully with any arm of the Parliament, but I simply want to draw to the attention of the population, particularly those in government, that the supreme law in this country is the Constitution. Even as Parliament makes the laws, the Parliament's behavior is subject to the supreme law called the Constitution. And in that supreme law, I am provided with protection under the rubric of natural justice. And it is my intention to demand and obtain natural justice from the Parliament or from any other location in this country. So where there are people who have expressed their bias on a particular matter, have taken positions of conflict on a particular matter, who have, committee or no committee, convened themselves into a court where they have already expressed their views in the way they've done, and they now must sit in judgment on me, I will seek protection under the supreme law of this country. And where there are persons who are in direct conflict, where they sit on the committee while their names or their email addresses are subject of investigations which are in fact proceeding under the police and under the Deputy Commission, while I will cooperate with the Parliament, I will take objection to this kind of absence of probity and natural justice in these matters. I will tomorrow be attending, I think, the second meeting of the Privileges Committee, and I will make myself available to hear what they have to say, and I will be ready, willing, and able to defend myself from any action of my parliamentary colleagues which falls short of the requirements of the Constitution of Trinidad and Tobago.
How close is the P.N.M to selecting a candidate for Sugar and Swiss?
Very close. I will tell you, we'll be screening for that next week. Probably on Monday. I think it's probably next week Monday. But the General Secretary of the party will confirm that. Maybe next week Monday we will screen, and we have interesting people who have offered themselves, and we will give the people of Chaguanas West, certainly in the P.N.M tradition, we will give the people of Chaguanas West, which we acknowledge to have been an opposition stronghold for all these decades, but we always, in any election, give the electorate of any location a candidate of the P.N.M. And this will give the people of Chaguanas West an excellent candidate so that they could choose between us and the others.
Just want to take this opportunity to ask one more question. When you were in the P.N.M. as a backbencher, as a whole, you had raised issues about Chinese contractors, Chinese with regards to NAPA and so on. Now we see the government embracing the Chinese in a particular way in terms of concessional financing. And there's been a debate about what this means for local contractors and so on. Any thoughts?
Well, when I took issue with the involvement of the Chinese contractors here, it was largely in the context of the procurement procedure. It was a procurement issue because these contractors were getting contracts here by way of procedures which were questionable or which were not sufficiently transparent. I raised that with the government of which I was a part, and I also demanded cabinet oversight of the projects which these contractors and others were involved in. And I did create some stress within my own government over that. I make no apologies for that, because the people of Trinidad and Tobago are to be served by us all, P.N.M. or otherwise, observing these tenets. However, the people who are now in government were very vocal in opposing every aspect of that. The use of Chinese contractors, the use of Chinese labor, the use of Chinese money, even the actual choice of expenditure, the building of the items, whatever they were, they objected to that. The Manning administration was accused of building buildings as against building box drains. And this was a major campaign issue. And I have no doubt that they garnered a lot of support during that election. I am now not surprised at all that having moved from opposition to government, they have completely changed their position. And they are now, with bigger bosoms and longer arms, embracing the very thing that they took such strong objection to. But it's not only with the Chinese contractors, there's Chinese involvement and Chinese money and Chinese projects. It had to do with the smelter. I would have pointed out to you all before, it was a UNC government under Basdio Pandi, who at the Trinidad Hilton introduced to Trinidad and Tobago the actual choice of a contractor, a supplier, to build in Trinidad and Tobago a smelter. Before it was talked under the Eric Williams government, the Chambers government, the Jamaican government, but when it came to an actual smelter project in Trinidad and Tobago, the first smelter project we had put before the people of this country was put by the UNC. I can still visualize the function of the Hilton, and all the good things the smelter would have done for our economy was spoken of by the UNC under Basdio Pandi. Yet, by the time it came into being under P.N.M. government, you heard a completely different story about an aluminium smelter. And in fact, interestingly enough, the very government that had no problem cancelling an internationally involved smelter contract, where there was work going on, where the economy was depending on that kind of development, this government had no difficulty cancelling that contract. But they had tremendous difficulty chasing somebody out the cabinet with a $6 million bill for an old fire truck. And they're telling us now we could have done nothing because it was done already. These are the same people who cancelled the OPV contract. We desperately needed those offshore patrol vessels to protect our borders. We're being killed by guns coming in here by drug dealers and human traffickers. And the government had the ships in hand to put them to work. They cancelled the contract. And the vessels then went to work for the Brazilian people. They're telling us now we were helpless when they came to us with a $6.8 million contract for an old crash fire truck. That is the context in which you must take what the government is telling you. Thank you very much.